But I really want to go back to the beginning. Tell us, Peter, where did you grow up?
So I was born in Pennycook, which is a town outside Edinburgh, and my first 10 years were in Edinburgh, and then we moved down into the south of England to Gloucestershire. So yeah, I had a mixed and a bit of an itinerant childhood, living in different places in England, and eventually coming back to Scotland just to finish off my schooling, and ended up going to university in Aberdeen. So yes, Scotland has been very much part of it, but England as well.
Did you study at university?
I studied forestry when it was still an important topic, and in fact so important that forestry and medicine were the only two subjects at Aberdeen that you actually had to be interviewed for.
Really? How did that go?
Well, it was actually very entertaining. I had no idea what to expect, and unlike our graduates and young guys that we see today coming for interview, I had had no training, no preparation whatsoever. And I pitched up at the university and was to be interviewed by the professor, and he invited me into his office and stood at the door and just said, "Sit down." And I sat down, and he looked at me very strangely, and I thought, oh dear, well, this isn't getting off to a good start. And he said, "Peter, you're sitting in my chair." And in my excitement of getting in for the interview, I'd actually sat down in his chair on the wrong side of the desk. So that probably helped me to get the admission, because it showed a bit of initiative.
So you got into that university because you sat in the professor's chair?
Well, yeah, because my academic qualifications weren't worth anything. So, absolutely.
What inspired you to study forestry in particular?
Well, I'd always enjoyed being outside, and in a couple of places that we'd actually lived close to woodlands or forests, and I used to enjoy just the ambience, the being outside, looking at trees. And so I had this very idealistic and romantic image, I think, about what forestry was. And one of my elder sisters had a boyfriend who was German, and he'd actually said to me, "Peter, don't think that forestry is just going to be about driving around in Land Rovers out in the woods." And he was wrong, because for the first 4 years, that's all I did.
So was it what you expected, though, the whole forestry course?
No. I suppose, to be fair, I had no idea what to expect. And it was basically a very science-based course to start with, biological sciences and physical sciences. We got, I suppose, the one thing that I was very conscious of, and that was really only after I left, was there was a complete lack of management training. And in the way we see today with graduates and the colleges and schools that do forestry, there's a much stronger emphasis on that, and that was very much missing. It was very much about being the professional forester from the point of view of understanding biology and silviculture rather than the management.
So did that affect you for where you went next on your first job?
Well, I was very fortunate in a way that I started off as a forester in the Forestry Commission, and I was thrown in at the deep end in South Wales in the valleys. And I had a group of workers who were all ex-miners, ex-union, or they were actually all members of the Foresters Union, but they knew how to treat or mistreat a young forester. So I got the school of life firsthand there from those guys, and it was fantastic. It was probably the best start I could have wished for, because there was humour to it, but there was also some good lessons to be learned about how you deal with people to get the most out of them. So that was really where I got my best training. It wasn't university; it was actually with those guys on the ground.
Oh, brilliant! And how do you feel about it now? Are you glad that is the route you took in your life?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I always say to people is that I've been extremely fortunate in something that I've been passionate about and interested about. Really, a vocation has actually also allowed me to have a career. So, you know, I'm extremely fortunate in that, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Well, nearly every minute of it, let's be honest.
Well, what if you had to name the best part of your life in forestry? What would it be? What's your happiest, most memorable times or moments?
Gosh, yeah, well, I think again that's where I'm so fortunate. There's so many of them, and they've occurred at different parts of my career and for different reasons. And you know, if I look back, certainly one of the biggest ones was the ability to travel and go off to Africa and work there, because that had always been an ambition and a sort of notion that I'd always had, that I wanted to do that. So forestry allowed me to do that. But if I think back to the happiest moment, it's generally been about people and actually seeing or helping develop people and seeing the outcomes, the positive outcomes of that. I think that if I looked back over my career, those would be the happiest and the proudest moments, certainly.
Okay, so from the Forestry Commission, what happened after then? Where did you go after that?
So I was posted to South Wales, having been asked for, or specifically requested to have a job in Scotland. They sent me to South Wales. So for the next 4 years, I pestered them to go back to Scotland, and they sent me to Lairg, which is about as far north in Scotland as you could go, and was the second most undesirable posting in the Forestry Commission. The first one was where I'd been before. So I don't know what I'd done to the Forestry Commission to make that happen. But it was also around that time that we had the opportunity to apply for this job in Africa. So it was after 5 years with the Forestry Commission that we went off to Swaziland. And so that was the sort of next stepping stone. And we'd gone there with the plan of 3 years. We had 2 young kids, very young, 3 months old and 2 years old. And we were going for 3 years until they were school age, and then we were coming back. But actually, we ended up staying there 14 years and coming back with 3 children and a completely different perspective on life.
And what was what you must have like an amazing, what's the biggest memory there that you have, moment? In terms of forestry, I suppose, what's the biggest moment there, what you were doing out there?
Well, I mean, it was a unique situation in that we had 70,000 hectares of forest sitting around a pulp mill. And I'd started off there as a silvicultural forester. And after about 9 years, I got the opportunity to be, no, less than that. It would have been about 7 years. I had the opportunity to be what was the forest operations manager, which looked after all the operations. So harvesting 1 million tons a year, planting about 3,500 hectares a year. We had a forest research department, and I did that for 3 years, and then I became the general manager of the forest for 4 years, which was looking after all of that, plus research, plus a motor transport department. And so it was a very rewarding job, because you saw it through from start to finish. It was a bit more like a agricultural type situation where you were planting trees for one particular reason, to come to the pulp mill, and you were harvesting them, and you had all the challenges around that. But I suppose the things that left the biggest impression on me there were we had tremendous wildfire problems. So fighting fires, or managing the fighting of fires, was probably a thing that sticks in my memory. But also just, it was a very, very labor intensive operation still. When I was running it, we had 1,600 people working in the forest. And associated with that, all the problems that go with managing large numbers of people. So industrial relations was a big issue. And I certainly got plenty of experience of that, as well as the whole gamut of forest operations, from nursery through harvesting through to transporting the timber to the general management side of things.
So would you say it was the most challenging time of your life?
Most challenging was definitely relating to industrial relations problems we had towards the end of my time there, which were related to political change happening in the neighbouring country of South Africa, and coming across into Swaziland, where the unions had only just been recognised, and we ended up with a fairly militant and actually quite a violent eruption of industrial relations problems as a result of the parent company wanting us to get rid of a large number of our own employees and contract the work out. And I found myself in the middle of a hostage situation where the Labour had turned very militant and had basically taken the company's executive and surrounded us and locked us into the main office block and held us hostage there until we withdrew all the redundancy letters that we'd issued to the people there. And that then ended up in a protracted place where I had been nominated along with the HR director to deal with the unions. And 2 years of that was enough to give me my fill of dealing with people in a unionized situation.
How long after that did you leave?
Well, at the end of that, really. So that had partly was what prompted me to think I need to get back into forestry rather than industrial relations, but also the fact that the family was getting to the stage where we needed to think about further education. And we wanted them to go to college or university if they could in the UK rather than in South Africa.
And so did you have a job waiting for you when you got back?
Well, I had to go and look for one. And principally every 2 or 3 years I'd come back and I'd pop my head round the door of the various private companies just to say hello and what was going on. But I was fortunate that I'd had a connection or an introduction to BSW and went there on one of my visits and was warmly received by the then HR director and told me that he was sure he could find a job for me. And indeed they did. And so about 9 months later, we packed our bags and came back to work for BSW Harvesting.
Brilliant. Was you a bit disappointed though because you wanted something in forestry particularly, or did you feel like you still got the forestry with the harvesting and what you came back for really?
Yeah, no, I felt extremely fortunate because jobs of the sort that I was looking for were few and far between, and BSW Harvesting had a good reputation. A lot of my experience in Swaziland had been to do with timber harvesting and the organisation of that. So yeah, I was very fortunate to have ended up with a job there.
Brilliant. So how long were you in BSW for?
Well, I started at the end of 1997, and in 2002 Tilhill bought us, so that was nearly 5 years. But because Tilhill bought us lock, stock and barrel, it still felt like very much like the same business that I joined in 1997. And
did your job role change from then on?
Well, my job role started off as a regional manager for the north of Scotland with BSW Harvesting, and after a couple of years took on the whole of Scotland, and that basically transferred into Tilhill. So that was my role for the first 4 years within Tilhill.
So what is your most memorable moment or what do you feel you've achieved the most in your time at Tilhill?
Gosh, yeah. No, I mean, I think I've been really fortunate to have seen a lot of really positive change in Tilhill and to have been part of a fair bit of it. And I think, when I look back, a lot of it's about growing initially the harvesting business. When I took the role, In BSW Harvesting, we were harvesting about just over 1 million tonnes a year. By the time I became director, it was nearly 2 million tonnes a year. But I think one of the biggest achievements was actually setting up the supply chain for the Caledonian biomass plant in 2000. Well, it started in 2008. We started that in 2006, and I'd been fortunate to work alongside the previous MD, Steve Lavery, in setting up the supply chain for Shotton. And that had taught me a lot, but that was my first solo effort, if you like. So that was one of the highlights. The other thing, as I've mentioned before, I think is around people and development of people, and being very fortunate to have been involved in the graduate development program, and championing that for Tilhill has been, one of the legacies I think I'd like to look back on and say, whilst it wasn't created by me, I've had a very important part in supporting it and promoting it and championing it, and I look back on that with great satisfaction.
Fabulous. Can you describe a typical day at Tilhill? Your typical day?
Yeah, well, I guess in the last 10 years or something, increasingly it's been an office day, which is not something I joined Forestry for, but have realised and accepted that would be the case. So, yeah, I suppose a typical day, there'd always be at least one, if not two, scheduled meetings of some sort or another. Would be dealing with emails, but I guess a lot of my job was also just supporting people in decision making, in how to resolve challenges and issues, and making sure that things were running smoothly. And I've often compared the role that I've had recently to being the conductor of an orchestra. So whilst you are conducting the orchestra, you don't necessarily have the ability to play every single instrument in it. In fact, you probably will play a couple of them, but that's it. But you're able to bring a load of experts and specialists and professionals in their field along to deliver one sort of output that to everybody else looks like it was relatively easy. And I think that's so all the parts that go with that, it would be part of a day's work.
Fabulous. So how do you feel that your dreams and goals have changed through time?
Yeah, well, it's I think inevitably they do, because one of the things, and I always tell the graduates that if I'm talking to them about my career, is that one of the first job interviews I had was actually with Economic Forestry Group, which Tilhill is really transformed from. And I can remember having an interview in Edinburgh, still at university, and there was a team of 4 or 5 what appeared to me old men in tweed suits sitting behind a desk in a darkened room. And after the initial introductions, one of the guys said, "So are you ambitious, Mr. Whitfield?" And I said, "Not really," because I looked at them and I thought, I don't want to be like that. I just want to be a forester out in the woods. And within about 10 minutes, my interview had come to an end. And needless to say, I didn't get offered a job. And I always say that, and I say, and now I'm a director of that company. So ambition is something that changes over time, I think, as to what your goals and where you want to be are. But I would feel myself, I would feel extremely fortunate and happy that I've been able to meet most of my own goals and ambitions that I've had through my career.
Can you name any difficult things that has happened, difficult and notable things that have happened during your career?
Yeah, well, I guess that's just part of any job, is that you will always have challenges and difficulties. And I guess I've highlighted one of them, which was the industrial relations issues we had in Swaziland, fighting large fires, and I suppose the thing that touched me most was we employed aircraft to both extinguish fires, fire bombers, and spotter aircraft, and we actually they would be contracted to us for a fire season. And I'd been on leave over in the UK at the end of a fire season and had come back and had just literally got back into my office when one of the research foresters had come in and said, "Oh, we're going up in the spotter to have a look at the forest and some pest problems and just have a look at the general health of the forest. Do you want to come up for and have a look?" And I said, "Well, look, I've only just got back in. I really can't spare the time just now, but thank you." And about 2 hours later, we got a call saying there's been an aircraft crash, and the spotter plane, which both the research forester and his wife, who was contracted to us as an entomologist, had gone up in a crash. And that was a very difficult time because they'd left a young son, and myself and the research manager had to go down and pick him up from nursery and try and sort that out. But that was probably one of the hardest and most difficult and challenging situations I've ever had to face.
You would have got on that plane?
I could have got on that plane, yes.
Whew, okay, let's bring this back to a nice little positive end. What is your best piece of advice for future foresters and harvesting professionals?
I think you have to, and I was saying this to somebody only last week, you have to create your own luck in any career, and it's not just for foresters or harvesting professionals. And to do that, you have to apply yourself to be as good as you can be in what you do. But also, I think you have to sell yourself. And when you do that, in the right sort of way, it opens doors for you. And it's only when those doors open you can see what the opportunities are and how you can take them forward. But I think that creating your own luck or working on creating your own luck is one of the most important lessons I would have learned myself, and I would sort of share with others.
If you had the power to solve one forestry related problem in the world, what would it be?
Yeah, that is a big question. So I think if I was thinking just about the environment I work in the UK, it would be about making woodland creation much easier, because for me, it is such a compelling story about the benefits of woodland creation, about climate change mitigation, about the green economy, about carbon sequestration, about employment, and all the benefits that go with woodland creation. If we could only make that so much easier than it is at the moment, that would be the big thing. And if I was to think of it in a broader context, I guess it would have to be around about how do we combat the issues of or the impacts of climate change and things like the spread of pests and diseases, and protect our forests effectively so that those ambitions for creating more forests are in the long term successful.
Fabulous, thank you. And before we leave, I want to do a quick fire round, and it's called 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. A quick fire round, and I'm going to name a time of your life, and you have to say something. You have to say what the most memorable thing is about that time. And what do you remember the most about your 20s?
Well, that would be getting married and starting a family.
Oh, 30s?
That would be Swaziland and my career there.
40s?
BSW Harvesting.
Can I go up to 50s?
Yeah.
50s.
50s being a director of Tilhill.
Lovely. So that leads us to, what is your plans for retirement and what are you most looking forward to?
So, yeah, I mean, when people say, are you retiring? I say no, because whilst I'm finishing working for Tilhill, I still want to be involved in the forest sector in some way or another. I'm not quite sure what. I certainly don't want to go and do a similar sort of job by any means, but I think I've got something from my experience and years working in forestry that I can offer back, and I would like to be able to do that. So that's exciting. I think for me, a lot of people sort of save up their ambitions for travel and that sort of thing as they go into retirement. I'm fortunate that we've done a lot of that. So whilst travel is very important to me, and the current situation has obviously put a kibosh on most of that doesn't overly worry me, but certainly that will be very much part of our future sort of ambitions and plans, is to do more traveling.
Brilliant. So not golf then, or anything, what everyone says?
No, I might be caddying for my son, but I don't think I'll be trying to play too much golf. That's not my struggle.
Brilliant. Oh, this has been wonderful. And on behalf of Tilhill and BSW, we want to say thank you for the time you have given to the company.
Thank you, Georgina. That was very enjoyable.
Yeah.